Hi there. Thank you so much, Brad, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to the Public Library, to the Utah Division of State History for inviting me here to Salt Lake City. It has been a true pleasure, and I'm really enjoying my visit, and I look forward to exploring more of the city tomorrow as well. And thank you all for everyone here in the audience. It's great to have you here. I appreciate you spending your Thursday evening with me and with the Utah State Division of State History. And I'm excited to spend the evening with you. So tonight, can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Tonight's talk is about a modern obsession. Innovation. In the early 21st century, we can't get away from this word. Business, political leaders alike talk about chasing the new thing. Our society celebrates things that disrupt and revolutionize. It seems certain that for every problem, there's an app for that. And cities and regions are pretty preoccupied with innovation as well. Places around the country, around the world, are trying to figure out how to be startup communities, how to be high-tech hubs. They are trying to figure out how to become the next Silicon Valley. So, what's the big deal about innovation? Why this innovation obsession? Well, it's pretty simple. For companies, innovation can mean great profit. For cities, innovation can mean more jobs, more prosperity, more efficiency, and a higher quality of life. And innovation certainly can have positive impacts, whether it's better health outcomes or a cleaner environment, whether it's more access to information or consumer products that cost less and work better. Or maybe it's simply an addictive new game on your smartphone. If we define innovation as a process of bringing new ideas into the world, well, this seems like a pretty fair thing to be obsessed about. If innovative places are where young people are encouraged to think big, to take risks, to have opportunities to nurture their talents and creativity, then that's something to celebrate and something worth striving for. Innovation is not new. Human beings have created and invented and collaborated and started new ventures and adventures since the Stone Age. In 2014, however, the speed of innovation is staggering. The people and ideas that are the raw materials of the knowledge economy now can be found in Bangalore, in Beijing, in Buenos Aires, in Bucharest. Fueled by the internet, ideas flow around the world at rapid speed, and all kinds of people are joining in on the conversation. This is different. This is new. But this is not about the world being flat. Sorry, Tom Friedman. It's clear now more than ever that the geography of innovation is highly uneven. It is something that grows in clusters, involving particular kinds of people and networks, and under certain conditions. Growing innovation requires the right environment, the right place. Growing innovation also requires good timing. And this is where history comes in. When people ask me what I do, I like to say that I give high tech a history. There's so much focus on the new thing in tech, and things move so rapidly that sometimes it seems archaic or irrelevant to talk about what happened in the past. Yet, as the organizers of this conference understand, when it comes to technology, just like everything else, understanding the past is essential to understanding the present and essential to seizing the opportunities of the future. So over the next 2 days, this conference is going to present multiple examples from Utah's past that show how both place matters and timing matters. And what we learn from this history is that the process of disruptive innovation, collaboration, invention, isn't just a present-day phenomenon. It's a process with a history. And the people and events of Utah's past 13,000 years can help track what the possibilities and opportunities might be for the present and the future. So take, for example, the place where we are tonight. Salt Lake City often comes up in the innovative places conversation, and it's no surprise why. Here we are in the middle of a place that is not only home to major technology companies, but that also boasts great universities, cultural and religious institutions, and an unparalleled quality of life. An exciting tech scene and entrepreneurial scene is booming here, and a lot of people are interested in making it bigger and better. So one thing that's useful is to step back and take a bigger perspective, a longer perspective. What's distinctive about Utah's innovation ecosystem? How do we explain how and why certain sorts of technologies have taken root and grown here? What are the connections across the different eras of Utah's development? How do the eras prior to and just after Euro-American settlement connect to the era of agricultural and industrial expansion and relate to the high-tech era? What is the common thread? How do we make these connections? The things we see here reflect bigger patterns across time and place. So stories from beyond Utah can help us make sense of what's special about this place and how this past relates to the present. So tonight, what I want to do is set the stage for the deeper dives into state and local history that will happen tomorrow. So I'm going to do 4 things tonight. First, I want to talk about what I've learned from my research, about what it takes, how and why innovation grows in certain places and at particular times. Now, this is not just a 21st century story. It isn't even a 20th century story. From ancient to modern times, we can see common characteristics and patterns exhibited by places of innovation. The next thing I'm going to do is dive deeper into the history of the place that has become the definitive model of an innovative region over the last 60 years, Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley's history, we see the same patterns and combination of factors present in innovative regions of earlier historical moments. Silicon Valley thinks it's a special unicorn, but it actually isn't. We also see that there can be downsides and trade-offs in building an innovative region, and that Silicon Valley's flaws can and should be a lesson to other regions that want to capture some of its innovative alchemy for themselves. Then I'll spend some time talking a bit about Utah and talking a bit about how I think what I've learned from what we can learn from other regions, including Silicon Valley, can relate to the history, present, and future of this place. And the last thing is that I'll look forward. I'll talk about what we can learn from this history, about where the next generation of innovation will come from, and what it will take to get there. So let's get moving. So a few years back, I wrote a book called Cities of Knowledge that talked about how Silicon Valley came to be. Because of my research, I often get asked, what was Silicon Valley's secret? What is the recipe for creating another Silicon Valley? And my answer is, there is no magic formula. There is no silver bullet. But I also say this. There are recognizable patterns that we can see if we look back over human history. Common patterns that are present when it comes to making innovation grow. And these patterns may go against the grain of what we've been told for a long time about the process of bringing new things in the world. So since elementary school, we've been taught about lone inventors, brilliant, dedicated scientists and engineers who've thought and tinkered and came up with world-changing innovations. We've learned about extraordinary people like Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell. Today, we know about the biographies and amazing personal journeys of people like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. But Thomas Edison might be the first ones to admit that there is no such thing as the lone inventor. For one, Edison was one in a series of 19th century inventors trying to find an artificial source of light. His incandescent light bulb was actually an improved version of something that had been invented earlier by another person and refined by yet another person. And what made his light bulb a success was not just in its design, but also in its timing. Unlike earlier inventions, Edison's came into being when there was a social capacity and a need and a capability to build a large-scale electrical grid to plug these bulbs into. A bulb is no good unless you have a plug. It also came when there was a consumer market ready and willing to switch from gas to electric lighting. He was at the right time. He couldn't have done it alone. So if this isn't about the lone inventor, then what does it take? Well, one baseline characteristic over the millennia has been that innovation grows where there are urban levels of population density. In short, it takes a city. Now, density isn't enough, of course. We can think of many places around the globe today that are very, very, very dense and are not particularly hubs of innovation. It takes cities that are centers of regional, imperial, or global trade and communication networks that are located along major lines of transportation and commerce that are connected to other cities, where people from different backgrounds collide and collaborate in unexpected ways. But connectivity also is not enough. Not every single port or trading post over human history became a hub of new ideas. The places that do this have three things in common. The first thing they have is resources. Now, resources can be both money or they could be natural resources. These give an economic edge over other places. They draw in new migrants. And importantly, they generate the wealth that underwrites scientific and artistic creation. Ancient Athens and imperial Rome were cities with resources. They had abundant hinterlands and were strategically on waterways that allowed them to become critical nodes of commerce. They were able to draw upon human labor and natural assets from vast empires. And the demands of empire required the development of new technologies. Greek and Roman rulers became patrons of this development. So resources development also came into play in Elizabethan London. Great Britain was a center of empire. Its explorers were coming back with treasures and rare minerals and natural resources never seen before by Europeans. Queen Elizabeth I was determined to expand this empire and surpass Spain, her main rival. To do so, she instructed her advisors to solicit ideas for new inventions, to sponsor voyages of discovery. The British Crown acted like a venture capitalist. It invested in risky ventures and out there technologies. It solicited them. The result was an explosion of inventive activity. Now, a very similar thing happened in the Cold War United States. The great struggle between the US and the Soviet Union for global dominance spurred giant public investments in high-tech weapons, space technologies, and in scientific research and education. So, next time someone asks you, what do Queen Elizabeth I and Dwight Eisenhower have in common, you have an answer. Now, I'll return to the Cold War and its economic impacts in a moment when I talk about Silicon Valley. So what's the second thing? If the first thing is resources, what is the second key ingredient? It's institutions. A set of strong institutions that increase opportunity and provide the space for new discovery to happen. Now, these can be a whole range of things. Take, for example, Plato's Academy in ancient Athens, founded in the 4th century BC as a center for philosophical and scientific study and problem solving. Now, it wasn't a university in the modern sense, but simply a gathering place for intellectuals. But it worked, bringing together great minds and giving them time to think and debate. So here's another case, the Mesoamerican civilization of the Maya. Their cities became home to extraordinary technological achievements. Facilities like this observatory were places where astronomer priests could observe the movements of the stars and get new insights into how the universe worked. Now, institutions can be buildings, and they can also be networks of knowledge. The craft guilds of medieval and early modern Europe are good examples of these networks of knowledge. Skills and technical know-how were passed down from master artisan to apprentice, and guilds carefully guarded proprietary knowledge and secret formulas. They maintained intellectual property in an age before patents or copyright. Again, these were urban institutions. And then we come to institutions of higher education. Since the emergence of the modern research university in the 19th century, engaged and dynamic universities have been the most central and critical type of institution needed to create a city of innovation. Universities can be the ultimate sandbox in which creative and scientific minds can play. They are places that allow the time and the space for ideas to be tested and to take root. And universities also bring together different groups of people with different skill sets and different perspectives, all together in one place. They're places for long-range thinking that can, most of the time, operate outside of market pressures. Now, the third ingredient is the hardest to pin down, but it's absolutely critical. It's the quality of place, or more specifically, the things about a city that draw people in and keep them there. This can range from the natural setting to the availability of housing or transportation. It's things that make the metropolis a desirable place to live. And it's about valuing culture. Cities of innovation all blossom as a result of a cosmopolitan society in which different kinds of people and ideas come into contact with another. They come into contact with another through artistic and cultural institutions. They come in contact with another in what we now call third places, outside work and home, where people can socialize and talk and think and argue and have eureka moments and drink lots of coffee. And more recently, as transportation and communication has made people, especially skilled and educated people, more mobile and more transient, the livability and beauty of a city has become a major element of quality of place. In a global economy with a high demand for people with certain skills, the cities that win are the ones that have the most attraction for a certain class of highly mobile workers. When you can live nearly anywhere, you choose cities with great neighborhoods, natural beauty, diverse culture, and perhaps some interesting quirks. So think about innovation and urbanization as codependent variables. Urbanization was critical to the acceleration of technological adaptation and the process of innovation. Cities concentrated multiple people and ideas in one place and created the need for new systems to organize human life, from churches to markets to sewer pipes. Taverns and coffee houses, theaters and spectacles, libraries and laboratories all fostered sociability, collaboration, and unexpected encounters. But before you start thinking that it's all pretty simple, remember you're talking to a historian and we like to make things complicated. So let me throw one other thing into the mix. A critical variable in all of this is timing. Innovative alchemy results from a region being in the right place at the right time. You can have all these ingredients, but if the economic trends are going in a direction that makes your major industries uncompetitive, then you miss out. And this is part of what happened in Detroit. So dial back nearly 100 years, and Detroit was the undisputed innovation capital of the world. It was the place where business leaders took the most cutting edge of all technologies and brought them to the mass market. In doing so, they changed the way that Americans and the world lived their lives, communicated with one another, and did their jobs. Does any of this sound familiar? This city became a model that others around the world wanted to emulate. Its leading entrepreneurs developed new ways of running their businesses and selling their products that had a game-changing effect on the rest of the private sector. It seemed like a city and an industry of limitless possibilities, driven by enough oil for 144 years. But wait, there's even more. Detroit was a great place of economic opportunity. The people who work for these companies had a higher standard of living than their parents and grandparents. Henry Ford famously paid his workers $5 a day, in part so they could afford to buy his cars, and they did. With car ownership rising, Detroit spread out for miles in all directions. But the prosperity didn't last. Global markets, technologies began to change. Overseas competitors began producing better, more affordable versions of Detroit's main export. Closer to home, other metropolitan areas started to compete with the city for jobs and for talent. The city had its problems of its own making as well. The prosperity of the Golden Age had benefited some, but not others. The city's leadership had done little to remedy racial discrimination, to enlarge opportunity. As the economy sank, long-standing social tensions broke wide open. Violent civil disorders raged on Detroit streets and flashed across television screens across the nation. Meanwhile, the global economy restructured in a way that left many of the people in the city without the skills and the education needed to compete. Now, Detroit's decline was not sudden. It was more like the air being let out of a tire over a course of about 50 years. By the time the tire was flat, it was too late to change. So Detroit's story reminds us that it's in the timing, but that it's also in the capacity of the people in a place to take advantage of that timing and take advantage of opportunity. So these patterns and historical processes really come to life when we look at the evolution of the region that has become synonymous with technology and innovation in the past several decades, Northern California's Silicon Valley. Oh, I missed a slide. Sorry about that. In many ways, Silicon Valley's story is a story of the American West. And the cultural traits and economic circumstances that contributed to Silicon Valley's rise are also relevant in understanding Utah. So let's go back 160 years to when the great innovative cities of today's West were being founded. Cities like Salt Lake and San Francisco came into being at an incredible moment of global technological and social change. The Industrial Revolution had scaled up manufacturing, transformed the rhythm of work and play, and helped set in motion large-scale migrations of people from one side of the planet to another. Everything was bigger, faster, newer. People needed to devise new models and systems to organize and take control of all of this change. Just like in 2014, you needed to innovate or die. So the men and women who came to California and the rest of the West in the 1840s and the decades after tended to be experimenters and tinkerers. They questioned traditional authorities and believed in the power of technology to elevate and improve the human condition. The region attracted the individualistic, ambitious, tenacious, and sometimes the weird. Yet its demanding natural environment brought them together in a remarkable degree of cooperative action, and also a remarkable degree of urbanization. One of the things to remember about the West is that it was a more urban region than the rest of the country well before the rest of America. If you're living in a climate as unforgiving and water poor as this, so far away from hubs of transportation networks, communication, and other anchors, you band together, you urbanize. And that has been part of the secret of this region since the beginning. Now, this ecosystem, risk-taking, collaborative yet also individualistic, oddball yet also communitarian, is part of understanding how Silicon Valley came to be. But it is only part. The real game changer was war. So let's fast forward to 1941. Proximity to World War II's Pacific Theater made the San Francisco Bay Area a major hub for wartime manufacturing and mobilization. Then, a few years later, came the surge in military spending that came with the start of the Cold War. So the Second World War and the Cold War provided the resources that were the building blocks for the later high-tech innovation in the Bay Area. This is something that often drops out of the stories that Silicon Valley types tell themselves now, the role of the government, the foundational role of public spending in making this region what it is today. The Cold War military-industrial complex transformed the U.S. economy, but as we understand very well here in the West, the military had a larger presence in some places than in others, and California received a disproportionate share of this spending in the 50s and 60s. So I like to call the US government Silicon Valley's first venture capitalist. The military created a large market for high-tech products that did not yet have commercial application. It invested in long-term product development and in basic research and in scientific education. One of the big beneficiaries of this Cold War spending was higher education, which became the key institution of the high-tech era. Across the US, the investment and enlargement of higher ed after World War II turned universities into economic engines who could play a powerful role in spurring broader waves of innovation and growth. And we kind of take this for granted now. This was not the state of play before World War II. The US government was not in the research business. There was no National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, none of that. This is all a post-war, these are post-war phenomena, post-war creations. Before the 1940s, universities got their money, if they got outside money, from private philanthropic investment, donations, from some corporate donations, and from tuition and state legislatures. But the federal government was not, by and large, that much of a player. So this really changes. First, there came the GI Bill, which in paying for returning servicemen to attend college vastly enlarged the student population and the ranks of the college-educated in the American workforce. For the first time, college became almost something that millions of people, the normal thing to do. And that was something that was a departure from prior to the war. Then the Cold War spurred massive federal investment in basic research in universities, as well as in science and math education. Basic research meaning research that didn't yet have an known application. Again, long-term thinking, long time horizons, a very different sort of investment framework. Now, once again, just as in military spending generally, this investment was highly uneven. Some institutions got huge amounts of federal funding and others did not. Two of the biggest grantees were in the Bay Area. One was the University of California at Berkeley. Its growth as a research powerhouse was further aided by state-level investments by the state of California in higher education. During the era in which Clark Kerr, who's pictured here, was chancellor of the UC system, the master plan for higher education developed in 1960 was implemented, which turned California's state system, all of from the universities to the state schools to the community college, into the preeminent public university system in the world, and it became a critical agent of upward mobility. While Silicon Valley did not grow in Berkeley, the presence of a world-class public university system was a key ingredient in making the Bay Area the capital of the high-tech universe later, simply because so many Californians gained the skills and the specialized degrees needed to succeed in the modern knowledge economy. Berkeley's presence also drew educated people from around the world to go to graduate school, become faculty, and that also helped seed the innovative ecosystem there. The place where Silicon Valley did grow, of course, was near the region's other major Cold War university, Stanford. And Stanford's presence was a huge factor in how and why Silicon Valley came to be. Now, Palo Alto was not the likeliest candidate for high-tech capital. Located more than 30 miles south of San Francisco, it was not very cosmopolitan at the start of the Cold War. It was a place of fruit orchards, pastures, and horse farms. From the time that Stanford was founded in the 1890s until World War II, little had changed about this landscape or this economy. Stanford itself was far from being the world-class institution it is today. But coming into the Cold War era, it had two unique assets that really no other university possessed, and these assets catapulted it into an entirely different league. The first asset was Stanford's Dean of Engineering and later its provost, a guy named Fred Terman. Terman worked hard to attract government grants and contracts to Stanford, as well as some of the most talented, identifying really talented young electrical engineers, among them David Packard and Bill Hewlett. And Terman also built its engineering and science programs into what he called steeples of excellence, recruiting the best faculty and the best students into certain parts of the university. Federal dollars started to flow. The second unique asset Stanford possessed was real estate. When railroad baron Leland Stanford and his wife Jane founded the university, they gave the institution nearly 9,000 acres of land surrounding the campus, with a catch. Stanford could lease out the land, but it could never sell it. Now, for a while, this was a big hassle. The land was costly to maintain, and being located out in the sticks, few people wanted to pay Stanford much rent to use it. But as Stanford's research profile began to grow and as defense-related industries expanded nearby, Terman and other Stanford administrators decided to take a big real estate gamble. All around the US in the 1940s and the 50s, commercial real estate developers had been building new sorts of properties called industrial parks that had become hot destinations for factories and offices alike. So in 1951, Stanford decided to build a park of its own. And this guy here on the right side of the photo is Fred Terman himself. The guy on the other side of the photo is a guy named Alf Brandon, who ran land and buildings for Stanford. In the middle is an official from Lockheed Martin, well, just Lockheed then. And they're pointing optimistically to, this is where your facility can be located. So they designated this package of land just south of the campus as a light industrial district and started recruiting young high-tech firms and corporate research facilities. Now, this was not your run-of-the-mill industrial park, in part because it was being designed by university administrators who actually didn't know anything about commercial real estate development. Brandon later recollected that if they had actually known what they were doing, they would have been, done it completely differently. They were just making it up as they went along, but it all worked. The Stanford Park was designed to blend in with the residential areas around it. It was designed to harmonize with the look and feel of the campus next door. It was a research park, an industrial campus, and it was a hit. But part of what made it such a hit, what made people, tenants banging down the doors to try and get into this facility, was that it came to be right at the moment when the suburbs became the place that most of America wanted to be. Once again, it's important to understand just how much public policy and public investment played into this transformation. One important provision of the GI Bill was general federal assistance in helping returning vets buy homes. This was one critical factor in fueling the growth of a huge private market for single-family homes targeted at young families. Another big incentive was the federal home mortgage tax deduction, which made it much more affordable and enticing to buy than rent. With crowded cities having little room for builders to build, new public investments in roads and highways created an infrastructure that allowed these new suburban subdivisions to grow on the far outskirts of cities. And suburbs offered families with children safe, pleasant, easy living in the 1950s and 1960s. Public infrastructure investments from highways to schools made moving to the suburbs a winning economic proposition for those who had access to them. And access is an important thing because, of course, as many of us as we know, that these suburbs were mostly racially segregated. The suburban boom made the rural areas, the sticks, the farmland, the orchards around Stanford, suddenly into highly desirable and expensive real estate. It was desirable destinations for families and for companies that were seeking highly educated employees who had making good salaries and had college degrees and advanced degrees. Add into that the pleasant climate and the laid-back lifestyle of the Bay Area, and you had a place with quality of life that could not be beat. What the mass suburbanization that we saw in outside some other cities and also outside San Francisco is not the sort of suburbanization that we see around Palo Alto and around what became Silicon Valley. It was a much more high-end, upper middle class, educated market that was, and that was also kind of marketed to educated workers in other parts of the country, saying, come out to California, you can come work for these high-tech companies, you can come work for Stanford, and you can also have this amazing Western living. So all of these things together, resources, institutions, place, came together to draw in talented people who became the pioneers of the modern high-tech industry. They created the density of people and ideas in this formerly rural place that fueled innovation, that made this sleepy collection of suburbs actually into a true city of knowledge, a city of innovation. These were people like Bob Noyce, an Iowa boy who moved to California to work for a branch of an East Coast company called Fairchild Semiconductor. He and some of his colleagues then quit and founded a company of their own. It's called Intel. You might have heard of it. The founding generation of Silicon Valley companies in the 50s and 60s generated successive generations of other companies. And here's where culture and quirkiness and risk-taking comes in as well. Because in the late 60s, of course, Silicon Valley was not only the birthplace of many high-tech giants, Intel among them, but it was also a home of the counterculture. Hippies and engineers worked alongside each other, and sometimes the hippies were engineers and vice versa. Divergent thinking was prized. Iconoclastic personalities were tolerated and celebrated. There was a vibrant national computer industry, of course, by the late 1960s. IBM wasn't anywhere near, it was headquartered far, far away from Silicon Valley, and it dominated the computer market. But IBM made very, very big mainframe computers at a moment when, in American culture and American life, when the cultural drive was away from big government, big companies, the big establishment, the man, and towards the small, the individualized, the iconoclastic, the personalized, Silicon Valley became the birthplace of the personal computer. And that personal computer revolution was in part fueled by this countercultural thinking, this divergent thinking, this offbeat, wacky thinking, this idea that we can take the power of computing and we can take it away from the man and we can put it on our desktop, we can put it on our laptop, we can put it in our hand. This cultural convergence is a really critical characteristic of understanding Silicon Valley. It's this tolerance of the weird, the embrace of the new, that opens up the possibilities for innovation. And the current generation of the internet generation of Silicon Valley companies have really tried to foster that, even as they have become ginormous companies on their own. They have created these headquarters that have these work-play environments. Google is full of massage rooms and ping pong tables and free lunch and sort of you could stay there around the clock, which is what they want you to do, and enjoy yourself in this college campus / elementary school playground that is work. And at the same time, outside of work, there's this tolerance of the weird, the embrace of the new that opens up the possibilities for innovation. And the kind of the things that Silicon Valley, the rituals of Silicon Valley include, really kind of out there weirdness like Burning Man and other types of, communal rituals. But this is all part of the process of a community that sees ideas as being seeded by being different and thinking differently, even as they might all be thinking differently along the same lines. But there is this openness and this willingness to experiment, to take risks, and this tolerance of failure. As anyone who's a tech entrepreneur will be the first to tell you, and certainly anyone who's a tech investor will tell you, the vast majority of tech startups fail. And that failure, and that anyone who's a successful entrepreneur will say, failure was a critical component of my success. I had to fail before I could succeed. As anyone who is a scientist can tell you, experimentation is a series of trying things out over and over and over again until you get it right. In a way, it's iterative, it's failing before you succeed. And that is also something that Silicon Valley has been remarkably good at creating an ecosystem that is failure tolerant. Now, not to say that it doesn't look for success and reward success, but there is this ability to, give someone a bunch of money, have them fall flat on their face, and they come back for more money, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to invest in you again because you're a smart person, you have good ideas. So that is a distinctive part of that ecosystem. Now, the success of the Valley has spawned many imitators, of course. Around the country, around the world, thousands of research parks have bloomed in an effort to replicate some of the Valley's magic. But here's one important thing to remember. Although Cold War spending provided the critical resources and grew the key institutions that made the Valley possible, a lot of this was done indirectly and inadvertently. Dwight Eisenhower never announced that the San Francisco Bay Area was going to be a science city. It just happened. Silicon Valley was in the right place at the right time. It had a lot of lucky breaks. But the people there also took advantages of the luck and the good timing. They took some risks, and they were willing to let the weirdness bloom. So, where does Utah fit into this story? There are some common threads here. Here we have another great city of the West, founded at a moment of great technological change and globalization. Here we also have a state with a long history of technological innovation, as well as strong networks of community and collaboration. We see this in the cities, and we also see this in rural Utah, where cooperatives and extension services allowed people to come together and make the whole greater than the sum of its parts. We have a place whose economy felt the impacts of World War II and the Cold War very significantly. It was and is a hub of defense and national security activity, as well as defense-related programs. Utah had many institutions that provided the space and the place for experimentation and innovative thinking. The University of Utah was one of the 4 nodes of the ARPANET, the Defense Department-funded network that was the predecessor to the Internet. It was the only node not in California. And just as defense-related research in Silicon Valley seeded vibrant industries in certain areas of tech, the ARPANET project here helped make Utah an innovator and center for computer graphics. So connecting past and present helps explain distinctive things about an innovative ecosystem and figure out how to nurture these distinctive things. But then, what's next? What's next for Utah? What's next for other cities of innovation? What can we learn from this history? How do we use this? How do we take this with us? What's the use? Well, as we see from looking in the past, the cities that were hubs of innovation in one era may not hold that title in the next. So how does a place that has been a hub of creativity stay that way? And perhaps even more importantly, how do we make cities of innovation better? Because here is the ugly truth. Some of the most innovative places in the world are not very good at being cities. They are expensive and exclusive. They have snarled infrastructure. High-tech revolutions in particular have not been very good at bringing a lot of people along with them. The skilled and the educated win, and economic opportunity slips away for others. So how can the places that are thinking about how they capture more of this alchemy of innovation for themselves, how do they do one better? So let's look at the future as doing things that build on the good things already here and make other things better. The first thing is to keep in mind is to invest in people and to do it better than it's been done before. Educate, mentor, provide opportunities to a broad range of young people so that women, people of color, people with disabilities, people who haven't been part of tech and other innovative processes participate in them, whether in industry or beyond. Make it so that the person talking about the history of innovation 50 years from now will have a whole lot more stories of innovators who were women or racial minorities. You've got some institutions here in Utah that are doing a great job of this, and let's encourage them and build more of them. The second thing is to invest in place. And a lot of this involves investing in cities. Knowledge clusters are starting to become more urban. From San Francisco to New York to Seattle, new economy employers have chosen to locate their headquarters in the city instead of the suburbs because that's where their workers want to be. When Silicon Valley came to be in the 50s and 60s, suburbs were the place. They were the desirable place. If you had the opportunity to go, you went. And also the prevailing wisdom was that location in a quiet, suburban setting, looking at a duck pond, some rolling hills, was critical to creative thinking, that you needed peace and quiet. Now we understand from how the human brain works and how human societies work, that actually isn't the case, that good ideas come when people have face-to-face interaction, when they come together in these unexpected serendipitous encounters. And we're seeing this now as workers vote with their feet, choosing urban settings when they can that offer cultural and lifestyle amenities that make life outside of work fun and interesting. So investing in place also means investing in institutions that are the engines of innovation economies. And this means higher education, first and foremost. Keeping state university systems, public university systems, the avenues of upward mobility and opportunity that they were in the decades after World War II is critical. It's an investment with huge long-term dividends. If you look at the annual list of the top universities in the world, which comes out of a Chinese university actually, publishes it, the 17 to 18 of the top 20 are US institutions, consistently. This is not necessarily because Americans are smarter than everybody else. It is because of 60 plus years of major investment, a lot of it public investment in higher education, making our systems the best in the world that not only educate American kids, but also bring in the best and the brightest students and faculty from around the world that want to come study here. That is a huge national asset, it's a huge regional asset, and it's something that is in danger of slipping away if this investment and this sort of a broad-based recognition of how important universities are is not continued in the society. So the last thing to think about preparing for the future is to build on your strengths, but be adventurous. Building on your strengths means understanding what are the things about the past, what are the assets, the core competencies that have developed over time, over 13,000 years of human settlement in Utah, that can be built upon to make the next generation of technology. But at the same time, don't be stuck in a rut of the past, saying, well, this is the way we've always done it here, so thus we're going to continue. Be adventurous. Embrace the weird. Take some risks. And remember, the history of this place is pretty amazing and audacious. It is a history full of adventurous people, of audacious people, people who built new institutions and organizations without being limited by old tradition or pre-industrial hierarchies. It's a place where geographic remoteness demanded that new ideas be tested, that people come together. So Utah's successes thus far have very much derived from things that are distinctive to this place, and these strengths need to be recognized and built upon. History matters. Nothing is entirely new. To run up that next mountain, to get to that next peak, we need to think about where we're coming from. The assets of one era are the foundation of the next. So this won't be another Silicon Valley, and it should not want to be. Instead, it should understand how the accomplishments and assets of the past can be leveraged to make an even better Utah, somewhere where vitality, inclusion, and adventurous thinking allow a new generation to create and ride the next wave of innovation. Thank you.